So, as for would I recommend the book? 100% absolutely. If you're looking for a serious piece of literature that's going to change the world, don't bother. But if you want a cheesy romance between werewolves and vampires with a fair bit of drama, then absolutely go for it. Hi everyone, my name is Terry Russell and today is Tuesday, which means it's time to discuss this week's Panic at the Book Club Book of the Week, which is Bride by Ali Hazelwood. If you like romance, fantasy, or maybe even thriller, basically anything fiction book related, then I suggest you head on over to the channel's intro video, where you can find out more information on how you can take part in this online book club. We list books 4 weeks in advance, and we accept your bookish feedback in a wide manner of ways. Post your comment below a video, send in a voice note, or even send in a short video clip of you discussing the book. Alternatively, you can just send me a direct message on Instagram. Misery Lark, the only daughter of the most powerful vampire councilman in the Southwest, is an outcast again. Her days of living amongst the humans are over. She's been called upon to uphold the historic peacekeeping alliance between the vampires and their mortal enemies, the Wares, and sees little choice but to offer herself in exchange, again. The Wares are ruthless and unpredictable, and their alpha, Law Morland, is no exception. He rules his pack with absolute authority, but not without justice, and unlike the Vampire Council, not without feeling. It's clear from the way he tracks Misery's every movement that he doesn't trust her. If only he knew just how right he was. Because Misery has her own reasons to agreeing to this marriage of convenience, and it's nothing to do with politics or alliances, and everything to do with the one thing she's ever cared about. And is she willing to do whatever it takes in order to get back what's hers, even if it means a life alone in Were territory, alone with the wolf? First, we'll discuss some spoiler-free points before moving on to a clearly marked section of the video, which will contain spoilers and more specifics about the book. As usual, let's start with the chapter lengths. These ranged from anywhere between 7 and 20 pages, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions. They were pretty ideal when it came to reading time, and even the longer chapters had me so engrossed and were so easy to read that I barely noticed. Honestly, it was one of those books that I had to force myself to put down because I could have easily and happily stayed up all night reading it. I think it was a great one for those who grew up reading those cheesy vampire and werewolf novels. As someone who did grow up reading Twilight and the House of Night novels and Vampire Academy and all of that, I really enjoyed this one. It did also have a little bit of spice, although I wouldn't say that it had tons, and the spice that it did have was kept relatively short, but this might be where my rating falters a little. I am not against having any kind of spice in my books, by all means, and I actually thought it was fairly well written. There was just 1 or 2 details I could have done without. And I'll leave that one with you. When it comes to the romance in this book, it was a fairly slow burn. I mean, we went past the halfway mark before we reached anything that I would consider a romantic scene, and then it was much later before you did get any of those intimate scenes. I did really enjoy the character development and the insight into these different worlds that the author created. I do think she could have slowed down a little bit and gone into a little bit more depth, and I certainly wouldn't have complained if I did have another 100 or so pages to read. I do think that she could have extended a little bit more on that fantasy side and still kept it primarily a romance book. I think that could have been explored a little bit more. As for the overall concept, I thought it was fairly simple, yet enjoyable, and really easy to read and follow. Very few books actually get me laughing out loud, and this was one of them. The humour and the randomness of some of the things that the character came out with was just realistic in its delivery in a way that just didn't feel like it was trying too hard. Misery just seemed like a genuinely funny character. While I was reading the book, I remember actually saying, yeah, I'm enjoying it, but I'll be shocked if I find anything genuinely surprising. Well, colour me shocked, because I think literally 30 minutes after saying that, I was in a plot twist that I just did not see coming. This book was kind of like trash TV in the best way possible. And I don't mean any offence by that at all. I mean, I'm going to be totally honest with myself and admit that I think that might just be my favourite kind of book. I just mean that I might devour this kind of book in the same way that an ordinary person might watch trash TV. It's not exactly a seriously amazing piece of literature. I mean, it's a romance about werewolves and vampires, so naturally it's going to be a little bit cheesy. I mean, you might not take it quite as seriously as one of the classics, however, it was super easy to read and I personally really enjoyed it. Now moving on to the part of the video where I suggest if you haven't read this book yet, go do that first, because beyond this point there will definitely be spoilers. And I'll just wait for you to leave. I'm just gonna say it. I could have done without the knot. I mean, the spicy scenes were well written, they seemed tense, and they didn't go on for too long. And then there was that. It was just not sexy. And that pun was most definitely not intended, but still appreciated. Everything else in the spicy scenes were fine. I mean, I could have just done without that. I don't really understand why she thought it was such a good idea, and I do understand why it might put some people off. I, for one, am quite glad that she didn't go into more detail. That being said, it wasn't exactly a huge problem for me. It was something that I could just move past and still really enjoy the book. I love a strong female main character, and perhaps I'm just mirroring, who knows, but Misery was that, and she was incredibly funny as well. Although I think that part of her character was a defense mechanism, which I thought was a really nice detail. You know, after being treated so terribly by the other vampires and her own family, who are all really careless and robotic in their logical thinking, and then growing up in a human world where everyone hates her. And then her one friend in this whole world goes missing. I mean, damn, if she didn't laugh, she'd probably cry, even if vampires can't do that sort of thing. So I just think that really added to her character, and the more she got to know Lo, the more she warmed up and changed. I know that they said that because she's not aware, that she's not hardwired to understand the mating bond, but I totally disagree. I think that the bond drew her to Lo and changed her in quite a lot of ways. Like, it might not be the same kind of thing, but there was a huge amount of character development that could all be explained by that. Misery and Lo were wonderfully dramatic at times, and he was really frustrating, especially because I think it was fairly obvious from a fairly early stage that they were mates. When Misery explains that it was a hell of a lot easier to be honest with Law when she thought that he was being honest with her, and his response is, "You can always be honest with me." What? Obviously not. I was fuming at him, at his denial that they were mates. I mean, at this point, I didn't really see what good it was going to do, and I was still rooting for them to be together even after all of that. I was not expecting Serena to be a halfway. It was a pretty good twist, and it just added to the levels of how scheming and horrible Misery's father was. I mean, I knew that the vampires were kind of assholes, but I did not expect them to be as involved as they were. It does kind of mean that Emery was irrelevant. I wasn't really too surprised that Mick was more involved. I mean, it wasn't going to be one of the more obvious characters, and he was one of the only other ones that we got more background context on. When a character has had such a hard past, like losing a partner and a child, and the book goes through the effort of telling you this, then you can probably guess that it's going to be significant in some way. So, as for would I recommend the book? 100% absolutely. It was easy to read, funny, and had some amazing twists. If you're looking for a serious piece of literature that's going to change the world, don't bother. But if you want a cheesy romance between werewolves and vampires with a fair bit of drama, then absolutely go for it. And will I be reading any more of Ali Hazelwood? Before Bride even came out, I already had some of Ali Hazelwood's books on my TBR, but I am a little bit cautious that I'm going to be disappointed. I don't think any of their other books are like this one, and if Ali Hazelwood does write any more like this or a sequel, then by all means I will snatch it up. And although I do think I will read some of their other books, I'm not exactly in a rush to do it. However, I am looking forward to finding out if I am going to enjoy some of their less paranormal fantasy romance novels. But let me know what you thought. Did you enjoy the book? Gemma said that she loved some of the previous books by this author, so she jumped on this. The whole storyline was brilliant, however, the spicy scenes, which has got a lot of readers divided, just weren't really for her, which did knock her rating down a little. But she's still happy to rate it a 4-star. She loved the werewolf-vampire crossover and the slow burn romance. Next week there'll be no Panic at the Book Club, however we'll be picking back up on the 28th with 5 Survive by Holly Jackson. So don't forget to get your comments and thoughts in by Monday the 27th at the latest to be a part of the discussion. You can now do this on YouTube, TikTok, or Instagram. The following week we'll be discussing King of Wrath, but don't forget if you do need a little bit longer to read a book, we do list the next 4 books down below and on TikTok along with the discussion dates. That way you can choose the genre that best suits you and the best time frame to read it in. Thank you all for joining, and if you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It is always appreciated, and I will see you next week. Bye!